everyone. Again, we're really excited to move into the next phase of our day, and this is our evening presentation by Myosho Nancy Blanton. She is going to be discussing chanting the Dharma, exploring Zen chanting as a contemplative practice. And again, Nancy has a very diverse background, and she'll share that with you too as she starts. But at first, we will start before we start the presentation. We'd like to do our opening Dharma verse, and we'll share that information with you, and we'll allow MMZ to be able to do the bells for us. So please join us in the opening Dharma verse, and then we'll get to start with the talk for by Myosho.
The unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth.
Thanks so much for that. And now I will pass the baton over to Myosho. Thanks so much for doing this. And again, as always, she will kind of have an interactive. She'll let us know when if she's going to open it for discussion. And also, if you would just go ahead and grab your chant book. You may use that as a reference as well if that's something that's close that you have. You can grab in reference to with her discussion. So, Myosho, excuse me with my tongue tiedness right now. I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can come on. Go ahead and come off mute.
Good afternoon, everybody. Matsuoka Roshi said, a person can be content with reading books and discussing them. To them, Zen is intellectual. Zen cannot be intellectualized. And for me, chanting is a way to incorporate the Dharma into my very being without intellectualizing it. And then when I connect with intellectual material, it becomes a real joy. And sometimes I'm just amazed at how that literature that I'm reading connects with these chants that we are so fortunate to have in our chant book. One of the things that I really wanted to talk about is why do we chant and why did I chant? I explained a little bit about why we chant. And in my background, I worked in a university medical center and Department of Psychiatry. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a neuroscientist. I'm a social worker. And that means I actually work with daily life with people. But I had this wonderful experience of being able to hear research and the latest information for about 15 years on the brain and how it worked. And when we meditate, the right side of the brain, the frontal lobe, lights up and puts out energy. We can see this on brain scans, and it gets bigger. We know that that does not do a whole lot, except there are little subtleties that we see that happen with people that meditate, and calmness, ability not to react so quickly. We also see this area grow as they meditate and get more into it. So long-term meditators have this huge right frontal lobe. And the right frontal lobe, and many of you might know, has to do also with our creativity, being able to write, and do all sorts of creative things. And this is some of the things that we see come out in practice. So in my life, I would take these information that I would see with in these grand rounds that I went to, and I would go back to my little office, and I work with the seriously mentally ill. And what that means is many of you have depression or anxiety, but the people I worked with were so crippled that therapy really didn't help. Nothing really helped, not even medication a lot of times. So I began to take this information back and look at the brain function and look at how I could intervene with people. For instance, we know that people who have OCD, their frontal lobe and their emotional brain don't connect. So if you increase meditation and you don't do the right practices with it, then you're going to increase OCD. And chanting is one of those practices that help us bridge that gap. People who have substance abuse or have been hit in the head don't have enough D2 receptors. And when I look at the chants, I see a lot of the therapy that I did in the chants. And one of these is in Sensing Ming, where it says, if you try to stop an activity to achieve passivity, your very efforts fill you with activity. And this is the highlight of alcoholics and addicts, because if you tell them not to do something, they're compelled to do it. If they say, I'm not going to use, and they focus on that and they focus on that, well, they're going to use. Because if you don't have enough D2 receptors, that's what it works. So I'm not supposed to say that, but I'm going to say it anyway. So now people do overcome that with practice and going to programs and working with therapists. But they still have a tendency to do it, and it's always there. We also know that when we sit down and meditate, we have this anxiety. We don't call it anxiety, but it's a tendency to want to run, to get up and leave the chair. I can't, and the head begins to say, I can't sit here. I can't do this. I'm not doing this right. I bet I'll never learn to meditate. Well, all of that is from the body telling us that we're uncomfortable. And so when you have people with mental illness, substance abuse, trauma, what you see is when you begin to meditate that sometimes that overstimulates them and they can't. So what can I do with mindfulness and good cognitive therapy to help these folks? And over a period of time, a lot of the people that I worked with who couldn't get out of bed in the morning went back to work, got jobs, and became productive citizens again. And we say, well, we don't want to use meditation as a means because Zen is not a way for everybody. And really what I did is not Zen, okay? But what happened to me is in 2009, I had a serious brain injury. And I knew that if I was going to function, I had to reformat my brain. And that is to reconnect everything that had been disconnected. And the right side of the brain was pretty much destroyed in the frontal lobe. So I don't have that meditation center. So it's like, to meditate is like trying to drive a car without an engine. So as I began to meditate, the anxiety, or try to meditate, the anxiety rose and rose and rose. And my center, I didn't have a Zen center, but I went to Shambhala Center, and they were meditating 3 nights a week, and so I went 3 nights a week. And I opened the center up in the morning 3 days a week. And when I would go, after I began to meditate, and my brain started to reconnect, I had tremendous difficulties, because when you don't have a network and your brain begins to make that network, it's like you go kind of nuts. And so I still do that sometimes when I'm not connected to something I know and I'm learning to reconnect. So I went through all that of depression, ruminating all night, which is what depressive people do, anxiety, crying for days on end, unable to stop, intense rage, and all those things began to come up. I was told that I would never be promoted in my job. And I went back and looked at all my work, and it was pretty bad, the writing was. Anyway, after about 3 years of working, my life came back to me and I got promoted. And during that time, there were times where my brain would start to reformat, and I couldn't go to the meditation center because it would activate me too much. And I would sit home in that hour and meditate, count with a mala, you know, a standard Tibetan, Om Mani Padme Hum. And I would do that for an hour. And I woke up about 3 years later, and, you know, I was functioning. So I'm still working. I'm still a product in work, and I'm still having difficulties. Most people don't see them. Some of you see me talk in group, and I sound kind of crazy sometimes, but hey, it's just me. So I have to get over my shyness. I don't have any shyness. My anxiety about how I perceive things in the world, and just go on with it. And chanting has given me my life back. It's given me my happiness back. And so I can't say enough about it. After about 7 years, I guess, I got a new neurologist, and I went to her. And I told her what I did for a living. She asked me all these questions, and she said, "You can't do those things." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she whipped out the brain scan that they don't show the general people at the hospital, the one that's hidden. And it was really much worse than I thought it was. I should probably just be at home drooling and staring at the wall. And I owe my life to chanting and to meditation, so I'm very committed to it. So with that said, let's look at what meditation does. We start with meditation, and we have all these difficulties with the body and with our thoughts. And the same thing happens in chanting. You know, you stand up to chant at the center and you go, "Am I doing this right? Why am I doing this? This feels uncomfortable. Is anybody looking at me?" And I see a lot of that, excuse me, I see a lot of that at the center on Wednesday nights when I was there for Ongo, and the new people would be, "Oh, are people looking at me?" So we have that same process that we go through when we sit with chanting. It's very uncomfortable. You know, people pick up their chant book and they'll go, "Oh, I'm supposed to chant Sanduka today," and they just won't do it because they feel that same kind of anxiety that they feel when they meditate. So, so when I came to the center, first thing I did was I hated standing up. Second was I hated the drum. The third one was I can't keep up with these people. Okay, I'll never be able to learn this stuff, especially the Japanese. So I just kept going, which is what we have to do to get better. So that dialogue goes off in your head, and some people go, "Well, I'm just going to do zazen. I'm not going to fool with this chants every day." How many of you do that? How many of you just say to yourself, "I'm not going to do these chants"? Any hand raising? Anybody? Well, they're very important, and they're really very lovely. So we're going to work with a couple of those today. After we've talked about what's uncomfortable about chanting. Does anybody have anything that's uncomfortable for them about chanting that they'd be willing to share? Anybody want to talk? Any thoughts?
I know, Nancy, when I first started chanting, oh, sorry, Pat, did you raise your hand down there? Were you raising your hand? Okay. When I first started chanting, and this was back in our old Sangha, it was embarrassing because I didn't know how the pronunciation of the words. You know, I just, I thought I was going to embarrass myself and throw people off. So that's why I was saying really, really soft, so people couldn't really hear me. So if I messed it up, but chanting became something I found that I loved. So that was my big hang up, is messing up.
Anybody else? Okay.
Well,
So
I'll
as we
jump
get to
in.
chant,
I have difficulty finding a breathing rhythm that doesn't interrupt the flow so much. When you're in a group, you can take a pause and breathe, and it keeps going. But when you're by yourself, it seems very disruptive when I have to stop and breathe.
Okay.
Can I add to that? I also have the breathing issue. I one time was asked to be Kokyo and I'd never done it. And I was awful because I was always trying to find out when do I catch my breath. So the breathing thing's a hard thing for me too.
Yeah. Anybody else? So
Buddy?
that's kind of self-critical, right?
Nancy, hold on. We got one from a buddy had his hand up.
Okay. Hey, buddy.
Hey, the chanting for me is drinking the Kool-Aid, you know. I mean, that's really going over the line. I can sit and meditate, but chanting's a whole nother level. I need to understand the whole, that's why I was looking forward to your talk today to understand a little more about what's behind the chanting. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Amy. And I find sometimes it feels awkward because my voice doesn't go as low as the very low chanters in a room I may be with. And so I feel like I'm an octave higher, and that it sounds funny to be at a high, you know, to be high up instead of very, very low. And so I've just had to barrel through and hear my own voice.
So a lot of self-criticism, a lot of, are people watching me, or am I going to get this right, or why can't I do it right? So those are the same things we go through in sitting. But chanting is sort of public when we do it around people. So we are actually meditating when we chant, just in a different way. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So the other thing that begins to happen when you chant on a regular basis is that the teachings start happening to you. Like you start understanding what you've been hearing or reading, and it comes in just little phrases or words. So when you chant and you begin to chant, the best way to do it is not paying attention to what you say. It's sort of like chanting Japanese. You just do it. You don't know what the heck you're saying, but you're just doing it, you know? And when we do that, what begins to happen is you'll be doing some task and a line will come up. And for me, that first line in the chant was, that chant in that says, I've lost my place, but let me go here. That chant on the Wednesday chant where it says, this moment is mine. How does it go from some of you? This moment arises with mind. This moment itself is mine.
Yep. And what she's referring to is what we chanted this morning with, yes, yep, it's the Kanan Sutra on page 16 of the chant manual. And we chanted that this morning.
So I chew on that, you know, probably for a month or so. And then the next thing that comes up is Dogen's vow always comes up for me. I can't help it. It's just the most powerful thing in the world to me is Dogen's vow. And I'm sitting there and this comes up. We are one Buddha and one ancestor, awakening Bodhi mind. We are one Bodhi mind. So here I'm thinking that this moment is mine. And then I'm thinking, well, we're all mind. And that kept chewing all the time, you know, throughout the day, off and on, or I'd be at odd moments and it would come up. And then I'd be thinking, what does this mean? You know, how does this affect me? What approach am I supposed to have? Okay. And then what would come out of that is there's a point in one of the chants we sing, we chant, which says, outside in and inside trembling, like tethered colts or cowering rats, the ancients grieved for them and offered them the Dharma. Do you ever feel how powerful that is? Have you ever felt like that when you sat down to meditate or you tried to meditate? Has anybody felt that insecurity or that feeling of vulnerability? Anybody want to share? Patty, did you want to share? Okay. And I go back again to Dogen's vow. And what came up for me there is our lack of faith and practice before the Buddha. We melt away the root of transgressions. By the power of our repentance, this is a true and simple color of true practice, of the true mind of faith and the true body of faith. And so I have that on my mind. You know, what is that? How does that relate? How can I feel like a tethered colt or a cowering rat, and yet be this person that receives this gift of the Dharma? And that is by repentance of my inability or unwillingness to practice that is the true simple color and the true mind of faith. How beautiful, how profound. And then my mind goes back to that piece about wide-eyed cats and white oxen. Now, what the heck does that mean to me? I know nothing of Japanese or Chinese symbolism. So I go to Sensei and I say, "Oh, Joe, what does that mean?" And so those of you that have studied those things that April likes, the oxen stories, you know what the white oxen means. So at the time of a trembling colt, I'm also a white oxen. And so in our studies and in our journey, these chants are really the foundation of what we learn and what we study. In one of the chants, it talks about, I can't remember the name of it, it talks about the back foot and the front foot being the same. That we are this totality of all we are. And it doesn't matter whether I'm a tethered colt, a trembling colt, or a white oxen. I'm still one Bodhi mind and part of the true mind of faith. And we all are as a community. And I think that these chants are what we're trying to learn and what we're trying to become in our daily lives with each other. There's another point at the end of this, the one I just read about the white oxen, and it says, "With practice hidden functions secretly, like a fool, like an idiot. Just to continue in this way is called a host within the host." I'll repeat that again. With practice hidden functions secretly, like a fool, like an idiot. Just to continue in this way is called a host within the host. So there is such beauty and such power in these chants. The other day I picked up Matsuoka's book, and I was reading it, and it felt like I was listening to an old friend. And I'm new to Zen. I've only been in Zen a year and a half, and I hadn't read all this stuff. But I'm sitting there and I'm just feeling chills because these chants are part of what he taught and what he did. And for us to do them is to make them a part of us. So I think I have a few more minutes. So I want us to go through the process that I went through. And so I'm going to do some of these chants, some of these lines, and let you sit with them, okay? So let's start. Everybody, you don't need your chant book, but just sit back and feel it and and just let go of thought and just listen to yourself, listen to your body, sense the wholeness within you. This moment arises with mind. This moment is self, is mind. Just feel your body, feel yourself. This moment arises with mind. This moment itself is mind. We melt away the root of transgressions by the power of our repentance. This is the true and simple color of true practice, of the true mind of faith and the true body of faith. Just feel your body and listen with your heart. This is the true and simple color of true practice, of the true mind of faith and the true body of faith. Like tethered coats and cowering rats, trembling coats and cowering rats, wide-eyed cats and white oxen. This is called the host within the host. Any comments? What was that like?
I'll go first. Myosho, thank you so very much for sharing. For me, I love chanting. I feel like chanting gets you out of your mind and gets you into your body. You feel it. The chants raise the energy. And when we're together in the Zendo or when I'm doing it out here, it immediately takes me out of my mind and into my body. It's the word that you said is the feeling, and it's, you know, coming from a Southern Baptist background and my grandmother who's still alive playing piano for the church, I like the fact that I don't really sometimes know what I'm saying and it's in a different language because you still get the same permeation. The chants are permeating your being and it vibrationally raises you, me anyway. I can only speak for myself personally, but I love the chants. I was so resistant to when I first started practicing over at Shambhala. Tibetans love their chants. So I was so resistant. I didn't know what I was saying, but you're right. I'm in the line and I'm like, oh, it's something that's coming up when I'm driving, something's coming up. And you're right. It's an extension of the teachings and it just goes right past the brain and into the body. So, I mean, I really appreciate you for sharing this and allowing us to feel this with you. So, Gasho.
Thank you. Dan?
Myosho, thank you very much. I remember doing the raisin meditation where you chew a raisin, one
Yeah.
single raisin.
Yeah.
And you keep chewing it and chewing it and chewing it and chewing it. and chewing it and chewing it and chewing it, the chewing resonates. Your mind, your head begins to have that kind of sensation.
Mhm.
And I particularly like kind of the intonation of something. You're talking about Dogen's vow and repentance. The word repentance resonates. And when we do our repentances, it resonates with us. So I think anything that we chant, anything that we use in a melodic way, takes us to a different place, similar to poetry, when we read poetry or when we do that.
Yeah.
I think in each of our senses we can do that. For example, Sensei and Hojo and I talked once about rocking, the rocking movement when we are chanting, how that, it's helpful when we see things and really allow ourselves to focus more broadly. But what you brought out to me with your talk and with your demonstration is just the beauty of it. It's just a beautiful thing to share, and I appreciate your sharing it today. Thank you.
Well, I'm particularly connected to Dogen's vow because I think it's the whole foundation of the 12 steps. And,
I would agree.
When Bill Wilson talked to Jung, this is where that came from. And I think sensing meaning is the practices you have to do to stay sober. So I really listened to that. Jung was reading Luck's Diamond Sutra when he died. So I think that we have this strong influence in psychiatry and in psychology for years. We just didn't know it. Anything else, Dan? Kashin?
Yes, thank you first for your lovely presentation. I am glad I will never just scan through a chant again. I will be looking for these precious moments that you shared, which is just delightful. But another observation, when I first started chanting, one thing, I like the sound of voicing. I really enjoy it. And as Fusatsu was saying, it really connects you to your body in a way that, your breath is coming out, for goodness sakes. It's coming out, you're breathing in. But the other piece, and I wondered if you had a response or a thought on this, is for me, the idea of chanting was the first part that got me more comfortable with it was thinking of the thousands and thousands of voices that have chanted these words before me. And before I fully understood all the words, I just started to feel that belonging to this chorus of voices over the millennia that have said these same words. And that enough was inspiration to try to keep chanting more. But I wonder if you could speak to whether that sort of sense of the wholeness of our chants with others, how that affected you perhaps, or your thoughts on that.
Well, time's not linear. And so when we step out and chant, we are one Bodhi mind and we are chanting with the whole world. And you think about it, not all of our ancestors could read. Where did they learn these teachings? Where did they become a part of them? Some of them had enlightenment experience without it, but a lot of what our ancestors and the people before us that are a foundation of Zen did was chant, contemplate, chant, do Zazen. The chants would come up in Zazen, and some of them, when you first do chanting, you don't have time to understand the words. You just let it flow. And so the mind begins to work with that, and you don't even know that it's doing it. It's unconscious. So that in itself is a profound meditation that we all do together. We never stop doing it as long as we're people and we're Buddhist and we have this little book. So yes, I think being a part of that body that's gone on since we started as Buddhists is just beautiful and wonderful. And it has such power to it. You okay?
Mokyo first and then Sugetsu.
Okay.
Hello, I just wanted to thank you, Myosho. It was just beautiful what you've done. And I have to say, I have been resistant. It's like one more thing I have to do. That's in my mind, one more thing. But this has been coming up for me recently, the chanting. It's on my mind. You know, it crosses my mind. I bet it crosses my mind every day. So you have pushed me over the edge. And I just want to thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome. Somebody else? Who else was it?
Sugetsu.
Sugetsu.
Yes, thank you for telling your story. That was something that resonated with me. In 1995, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had a 7% chance of living another 5 years. So after some discussions with Hojo, who gave me some chants and some visualizations, I began doing one of Hakuin's chants, the Rinzai teacher from the 1700s. This is Yasin Kana, or the Nikon of the Senin. But I've been doing that chant every day since 1995, and it's a wonderful way to start my day. I do it in the shower where there's a nice echo. But as I do this, the chant itself is intended to be done when you're in a meditative posture, and so I don't often do that. I just chant it standing up in the shower, and it's a great start for my day. And Hojo, thank you for giving me the chant. This has been something that I had not thought about, the connection between the chant and my being able to survive this difficult cancer. So thanks for bringing all that to mind, Myosho.
Well, Roger, I think from what we've seen and what I've seen in the work that I've done, that chanting works on a different part of the brain, and I think it works more in connectivity. It also, connects with what we do in Zazen, which is that right frontal lobe begins to grow and begins to take over. But I think chanting helps us work with all parts of our brain. I think that it works with the body. It begins to pull and make that part of the brain connect with the rest of the body and the rest of the brain. And so in my own life, I've seen this happen. Just sitting meditation alone didn't work for me. I had to have something, and I see this with a lot of mentally ill people too, is they have to have something to connect and make their brain work better as a whole. And this is true for chanting, whereas that the sitting calms that frontal lobe, which is our thinking, our impulse control, our creativity, how we feel in the world, our ability to be calm. But when you start activating it with a lot of people that are sick or have a mental illness or have depression, what that does is overload the rest of the brain. And so we have to have something to balance it. I think Tashin and his work, I go to the group on Tuesday night, and when he's there, he talks about all this mindfulness stuff, and he integrates that with whatever we're talking about. And I know from my experience working with people that that's what makes people better, because you're using more of the brain than just that front part. And so these practices that we do, mindfulness, chanting, all these kind of things, transforms people's daily lives. I think too that there's some connectivity with heart that goes on through chanting. And I've also experienced the chant taking me. In the beginning, I struggled with just saying the chant and being okay with that. And then as it becomes my friend, it takes over. The chant takes over. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's where the heart opens. And it's a beautiful process.
Thank you.
Fusatsu, may I speak?
Sure.
This is Ikusei from the Falmouth Soto Zen Sangha. This has been a very, very wonderful talk for me. I've always loved chanting, but I didn't know why. And I've thought of it as, now I realize it's really gives my mind and my body something to chew on. It's a concrete experience that is in some ways more engaging of the whole than just sitting. And the other thing is, I'm aware that in terms of human history, it's really only in the recent past couple hundred years that society that is literate. And so for all that time of human life, this kind of activity must have been just ubiquitous and endemic, just something that was permeated the culture. And now in our modern life of TV screens and digitized information, we have moved very far from it. And I often think that perhaps that is really to our great detriment, and it moves us away from wholeness and sanity. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your comments. It's wonderful.
I got Sensei Zenku first, and then Sensei Hojo Sensei.
Yeah, no, thank you, Myosho, very much. I very much enjoyed it. I've always felt that, meditation and chanting, though we are learning a lot about scientifically the effects they have on us and on our brain, but I think to a large degree they're very integrated. And one helps the other. As we just heard, I agree. Sitting in Zazen, sometimes the breath alone is not strong enough, and our mind is still wandering a great deal in the beginning, let's say, of a retreat, or in the beginning of our Zazen. But when we come to chanting, the same mechanism is at work. We are trying wholeheartedly to put our effort into what we're doing, whether it's on the cushion, being aware of this moment, or when we're chanting, just being totally 100% into our chanting. And so that's when we came up with resistance. When you first talked, it's like, okay, so what comes up for you about chanting that maybe puts you off? Well, these are the very things that we need to be aware of. This is wonderful information. Now let's continue to let go of these things and get more, don't be distracted by them. Keep letting go of those distractions, and more completely dive into chanting, dive into meditation, dive into our life too. And so these things teach us. I really think, I want to thank you very much for sort of opening up the arena and our understanding of chanting and benefits and effects. Thank you very much.
Well, the Tibetans originally, until the last few years, they did the chanting before they did the sitting. And, in Atlanta, you have the Kagyu, the group there, they don't sit, but the Kagyus and the Nyingmapas do. And, Chogyam Trungpa said that sitting is the highest form of meditation. So sometimes we need a prep to be able to get to Zazen. And my thinking is, in my own experience with the challenges I had, that the chanting was a prep that helped me begin to sit. I remember I chanted about 3 years, and then one day my mind just opened up into this wide openness. And then I could sit and meditate. But with the challenges I had, I didn't, it's like driving a car without an engine. It just wouldn't go. And chanting prepared me for that. And so I think for people that are challenged and can't do Zazen, it's a good opening. It's a good way to open.
Yeah.
You got Hojo Sensei, and then I'll go Pat next.
Just a few things on that. I was a little bit late. I was literally picking up laundry. Our washer still is. We still don't have a washer, so I'm running to the laundromat. So after the ecstasy, the laundry, right? And I came in a little late, so I didn't catch the whole talk or the whole presentation. But Nancy, Myosho and I have gone over this subject quite a bit. Some things Matsuoka Roshi said, I remembered when Nancy said about being a prep. He used to say, in Chicago, you would come into the Zendo, it was a 3-story brownstone walk-up right on Halstead Street, south of Fullerton, very, very busy area. And you'd come right in off the street after parking or get off the L and walk down a few blocks and so forth, so you were kind of like in that state of mind. So we would chant, I believe we chanted the Japanese Hanya Shingyo version first, and then we would sit the 2 40-minute periods and the interim in between when he'd often give a talk. And then at the end we'd chant in English, we'd chant the other version. And he described it as a kind of a segue coming in off the busy street, and it helps calm you down and prepare you for the intensity of Zazen.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then when you get out of the deep rabbit hole of Zazen and had to go back out on the street, the chanting kind of provided the segue transition there as well. And I was privileged to practice with him in person a lot, and he would make little comments from time to time, which I've done my best to write all those down that I can remember. And he would say, chant more with your ears than with your mouth. Mm-hmm. And he said, the chanting is the meaning of the chanting. It doesn't matter whether you understand the words. Little tips like that. So, Master Dogen's chant, or this one, the vow starts out, we vow with all beings from this life on throughout countless lives to hear the true Dharma. So you could argue that if you're chanting, you can't hear the Dharma. I think it was Krishnamurti said, if you speak, it is silent. If you're silent, it speaks, right? So, but Dogen was very clear on this. He would say, people say the Dharma is not the written Dharma, not the record is handed down. We've long burned the sutras and so forth. But Dogen insisted that that's also the Dharma. So chanting and that kind of participation in chanting, whether you're understanding the words or not, and many people don't like to chant in Japanese. I happen to prefer it because it's so melodious and musical. And there's I had to know what I was saying in English. I had to translate it as I was going before I could memorize it. I couldn't memorize the Japanese in the beginning. But later on, I could just hear the chant coming from inside. Mm-hmm. Chanting, whether it's English or Japanese, didn't matter. It's as if somebody else was chanting it. And those turning points, I think, are very important in Zazen as well as in chanting. So to hear the true Dharma doesn't mean it's not in the chanting, but nobody would suggest that you sit in Zazen and chant, subvocally, that you chant all the time you're sitting. It can't do any harm. But if you're going to hear the true Dharma, there's a point at which you have to start listening, right, rather than chanting. But that's on a very subtle level, right? So it doesn't indicate. I would like us to do more chanting. I've set most of the liturgy to music. And in some cases, I use the chant as a drone. under a melodic setting, or the Japanese was chanted underneath, while the English is sung as a melody on top of the Japanese. So I think we should be creative about this, and that's what I really appreciate about what Nancy is doing with this approach. And I hope more of you can join her. I plan to join once in a while by invitation.
You're always invited. Well, you know, I think you missed the part where I said that sitting activates the right side of the frontal lobe. And that's where, when they do brain scans, they see the light up, they see the changes. And I really think that, from my experience, that the chanting is more about the network. You know, I had a guy that was, he used to hide under his desk because he had to panic so bad. And he sang in a church, in a Catholic church. And I'd say, well, what happens? And he says, well, I sing, and it's like my whole body and my whole being opens up. Yeah. And, you know, that really hit me, because I realized that is a different system than that part that we use when we sit in zazen. But the thing is, to make the brain work, we need some of both. We need some mindfulness.
It's a harmonious relationship.
Yep.
There was a famous country folk singer who stuttered terribly. He couldn't talk, he could hardly talk.
Mel Tillis.
But when he sang, it was not a problem.
Yeah.
Mel Tillis? Yeah.
Yeah, Mel Tillis.
Yeah. So I got a question from Pat, and then maybe one other question, so we can keep on our time. So thanks, everybody. So Pat.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy. I was going to comment on, I moved to the Atlanta area in 2015, immediately joined up with Shambhala, and was introduced to chanting. And I thought it was a dumb idea before I did it, but especially the Heart Sutra and that drumming, I was transported. But I never have chanted at home, because it felt, I just assumed that you would only chant with a group of other people. It's like, and then today, after you talked about the trembling colt and the cowering rat, it's like, I thought, yeah, I hook onto the visual so much more than just sitting and watching. But chanting at home, you suggest that pretty strongly. I can see that, yeah. So you've introduced me to these phrases that are completely overlooked about the beauty of them.
Well, for everyone that I said, there's tons of others that will come up for you in your process if you chant these, that will enliven you totally. These are just a snapshot, but just about all of these chants have these power to wake us up and let us see. And you never know where it's going to come from, and I might interpret it for a year one way, and then a year later I'm going to interpret it another way as I grow. And that's the way they're constructed. And so in the beginning, we just chant them. We're not looking at what they mean or what they say. We're mouthing the words, and you're feeling it. And then the unconscious begins to work with it, because it's not intellectual. The other side of the brain is waking it up for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I see Hojo, I see your hand up, but let me just ask if there are any other folks that have not got a chance to speak. Was there anyone else that wanted to have anything to say or a question before okay, Sensei Tashin, and then we'll go to Hojo, and then I'm gonna pause us at 3:28 because we'll need to do the closing Dharma verse, and then I'll hand it back over to MMZ. All right. So Sensei Tashin, Hojo Sensei, and then MMZ.
There's a folk singer from Prince Edward Island, the next province north of Nova Scotia here, who wrote a song called Zen Gospel Singers. We only sing one note a day.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that. That's gonna be the takeaway, the one no today. All right, Hojo Sensei.
Yeah, I wanted to say that Nichiren, the Nam-myoho Renge Kyo group, they invented those practices because they recognized that many people would not do Zazen. So you can chant no matter what you're doing or where you are. So I recommend, and the way I've memorized a lot of the work that I've done, of course, is by setting it to music, but also chanting while driving. One of the best times to chant is if you're on the commute. You can sneak it in anytime.
Yeah, I think you should chant whenever you want to and do it freely. You're not necessarily standing up with holding a book.
Myosho, thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your insight, for sharing your wisdom. We will take this knowledge and this wisdom with us into our day-to-day practice. Thank you so much, Gasho.
Gasho, thank you. Thank you all for allowing me to speak.
All right. So what we're going to do is, if Kushin will help us, I will share do a screen share on the Dharma closing verse, and then we will hand it back over to Sensei Zenku and Kushin to take us into Zazen. Ready?
Beings are numberless. I
vow to free them.
Delusions
are inexhaustible.
I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. So we'll take a moment to stretch and before we begin our Zazen.